Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Yes, welcome to the 26th Annual Research Showcase. I'm Dave Maruca, and it is my honor, once again, to be your moderator. The DOT's theme for this year's event is Pathways to Sustainability. Cell phones. If you have a cell phone, please, at this time, put them on mute. In fact, I'm going to talk to myself because I think mine is not. There we go. Restrooms. If you go out the door you came in and go towards the back, both upstairs and downstairs, you saw a staircase. At the top of the staircase on the right, as well as downstairs, the restrooms are there for those that have not been at this facility before. Exits. Please take a look around at your exits. We have one over here, obviously where you came in. There's actually exits in the back up at the top for people upstairs. God forbid something happens, we want to be able to exit quickly. So please be aware of your surroundings. And then I think this leads you right outside, and right as you go through the other side, there's an open exit there to go right outside. God forbid something happens. This is a smoke-free campus, so please no smoking at this facility. If you have any questions regarding a topic, please raise your hand, and we will facilitate the discussion with wireless microphones at the end of each presentation. So please wait to the end of the presentations if you have a question. Certificates will be provided for attendance at the end of the day as you exit the building. This conference provides 2 PDHs, professional development hours, for professional engineers. We are also making available AICP maintenance credits for planners. Today's presentations and video live stream will be posted on the NJDOT Tech Transfer website after the event. Please do not bring food or drink into the auditorium. I've seen a lady, she went, whoop, put it down real quick. Please keep that outside. Lastly, a survey of today's events will be sent to your email via SurveyMonkey. Please complete the survey to assist us in improving this program for the next 26 years. For welcoming remarks, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Eric Powers. Eric joined the department in 2001, but who's counting, right, Eric? As a transportation planner in the Division of Statewide Planning, serving as project manager for the state's first statewide freight transportation plan. In 2013, he was promoted to section chief in the Bureau of Trucking Services, and in 2014, he joined the Division of Capital Investment Planning and Development as a manager of the Bureau of Capital Program Coordination. Eric was then promoted to Director of Capital Investment and Program Coordination in 2017 and served in the capacity until being appointed to the position of Assistant Commissioner of Statewide Planning, Safety, and Capital Investment in October of 2023. Eric earned a bachelor's degree in economics with a concentration in public sector finance from Florida State University and a master's degree in city and regional planning from none other than Rutgers University. Let's give a warm welcome to Assistant Commissioner Eric Powers.
So 3 minutes ago, we're outside, and he says, I had to cut your bio down. I said, just say my name because, it's not about my bio today. It's really, today is about all the work that all of you do. So I think you're the ones that are really important here today. So as Dave mentioned, the theme is Pathways to Sustainability. We're excited to have you here at NJDOT's 26th Annual Research Showcase. This is a cornerstone event for the Bureau of Research, Innovation, and Information Technology. Your interest, participation, and partnership are what makes our collective research efforts successful, rewarding, and impactful. It truly does take a village. If you look around, we have Federal Highway, FTA, AASHTO, counties, municipalities, MPOs, academia, students, other state DOTs, NJDOT, NJ Transit, the consulting industry, Mercer County Community College, Dave, other attendees, just to name a few. It takes all of us really coming together to make these programs work. So let's judge one another by the good company we keep and the good work that we do together. A special thank you today to today's presenters, including the NJDOT Commissioner, Francis O'Connor, Sutapa, the Planning and Program Development Manager, Federal Highways New Jersey Division Office. Our keynote speaker, Jim Timon, Executive Director of AASHTO. Distinguished panelists, breakout session presenters, poster presenters, and moderators. Turn page after applause. All right, let's go. I didn't know if that joke would work, but I figured I'd try it out, so here we go. So how does DOT create pathways to sustainability? Well, that's a good question. Thankfully, I don't have to answer that, but the panelists will a little bit later in the program. My role today is really just to thank you for joining us, narrate some excitement about an enlightening and productive day. And finally, it's my great pleasure to introduce the Commissioner of Transportation, Francis O'Connor, who will provide opening remarks. Under his leadership, DOT has been dedicated to ensuring safe and efficient transportation for the residents of our state. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Commissioner Francis O'Connor for his opening remarks.
Good morning. Good morning. Very good. Good morning to my many colleagues here from the DOT. I have to give a shout out to them, but I also have to give a shout out to a special person that's here with us today, Joe Pettoni, our Deputy Commissioner of the DOT, who doesn't often come out to these events. I'm trying to get him back out, but Joe, thank you for being here. Turn page, applause. I know it's early, come on. Also, we have our Chief of Staff, Chris Scales, here. Jim, welcome back to New Jersey. Jim just lives, I guess, a mile away from here, his parents. And hopefully your parents will be here to see you speak for the first time, so that's good. And not put any pressure on you, so. Thank you, Eric. The one thing coming into this job was so easy, where the former Commissioner, Diane Gutierrez-Scacchetti, set up a department that was just truly outstanding. And going to all my assistant commissioners and my colleagues that work at the DOT, she did a tremendous job in 7 years, well, 6.5, and then naturally the half year as Chief of Staff, or the year as a Chief of Staff. And she left me a foundation of the work that we'll continue to do throughout the state. So I have to do a shout out to her. She's still around. She's still the special advisor to the governor, which I call her. She's the second Chief of Staff for the governor. But a big shout out to her. It's a pleasure to be here at the Research Showcase and to see so many talented minds gathered in one room. As you can imagine, I have a lot of events as commissioner, and I'm grateful for every opportunity to talk transportation and share insights with my industry peers. But I have to say, I was especially excited to come here today, and this is why. Events like this are a reminder of what's possible when we keep pushing the boundaries of what we know. Research is at the heart of progress. It's not just a step in the process, it's the foundation for every solution we bring to our highways. Without it, we simply react into problems instead of anticipating them. To put it another way, research is the most important asset we have when looking for ways to make our transportation infrastructure more sustainable, more resilient, and above all, safer for everyone who relies on it. As many of you know, one of my main priorities as commissioner is improving safety for motorists, for pedestrians, and our own hardworking crews who put themselves in harm's way every day to get the job done. I know improving safety is a big challenge, especially when we can't control driver and pedestrian behavior. That's why we need even bigger ideas. Right now, we're pushing out a safety messaging to the public. You may have seen some of the billboards or heard the radio spots. We call it the what if. What if the last thing you saw crossing the street is a driver texting? What if the last thing you saw when you're driving the car with your children, a person in the other car multitasking? The goal is to give motorists a wake-up call about the human cost of what their unsafe driving habits. We want the people to understand that roadway safety is everyone's responsibility. But that is just one piece of the puzzle. We always have to ask, what more can we do? And that's why events like this matter. They foster collaboration, inspire new thinking, and encourage us all to get answers we don't have yet. Whether it's cutting-edge materials, innovative traffic management strategies, or sustainable practices, the ideas and advancements showcased today are the building blocks for a better future. To the students presenting your work, know that your research isn't just an academic exercise. It's part of a larger mission to create a safer, smarter, and more sustainable transportation system. Keep asking questions, keep challenging the status quo, and know that your ideas have the potential to shape tomorrow's solutions. I also want to thank the Federal Highway Administration for sponsoring today. And congratulations to New Jersey DOT's Bureau of Research, Innovation, and Information Transfer in partnership with the Rutgers Center for Advanced Infrastructure and Transportation for once again organizing an exciting research showcase. Thank you for coming, and let's have a great day.
Thank you, Commissioner. Our final speaker for opening remarks is Sutapa Bandyopadhyay. Sutapa is a Planning and Program Development Manager at Federal Highways New Jersey Division Office since 2019. She is responsible for leading a team of 4 transportation professionals who oversees a wide range of programs, including statewide and metropolitan planning, environment, research, right-of-way, freight, asset management, performance-based planning and programming, complete streets, bike ped, and highway information system. Whew. Some of her other responsibilities include discretionary grant applications, review and development of federal highway workshops and training materials. Prior to working at Federal Highway Administration, Sutapa worked as a principal planner at the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, NJTPA. I always think of Mary and me when I think of NJTPA. She is a certified planner of American Planning Association, APA. She has a PhD from the University of Denver. Let's give a warm welcome to Sutapa Bandyopadhyay.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here on behalf of our division administrator. This is the first time I'm kind of giving opening remarks, so I'll be a little nervous. Bear with me. So as David said, I'm from the Federal Highway Administration, the New Jersey Division Office. We have an office in Trenton, and we monitor the distribution and use of the federal highway funds in New Jersey. I'm very glad to be here today and see so many attendees. I think this is a very important event that NJDOT puts together every single year because it helps us as well as DOT to examine and analyze and evaluate the success and the challenges of the statewide planning and research program to a certain extent. I'm not sure how many of you are aware, but 25% of the funds of statewide planning and research program goes to research that is conducted by the higher education institutes, the consultants, the other research agencies. So this is a very important event for us as well as NJDOT. And I like the fact that we celebrate the success of the research that is going on in so many agencies and so many fronts in New Jersey. And like the commissioner said, research is the building blocks of a lot of innovation and a lot of changes that happen in the industry and will keep on happening in the industry in future. I would like to point out that today's topic, Pathways to Sustainability, aligns very well with the strategic plan that FHWA has. We have two points in our strategic plan which looks into climate and sustainability and transformation. So the climate and sustainability, that core goal that we have emphasizes on reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and also building a resilient infrastructure. And today's event, also I did see, like in the agenda, a lot of discussion and a lot of presentations are geared towards that topic. The other core goal that we have, transformation, actually looks into designing for the future. It talks about investing in purpose-driven research and innovation to meet the challenge of the present and modernize a transportation system to meet the requirements of the future. FHWA have been concentrating a lot on reduction of greenhouse gases. And one of the reason is it is the production, the transportation is one of the industry that produces a lot of greenhouse gases. So we have been investing in programs. So we have 6 new programs under the bipartisan infrastructure law that concentrates on greenhouse gas emissions as well as resiliency. Like we have the carbon reduction program, we have Protect, a formula funding side as well as a discretionary grant side. Then we have multiple grant programs and funding programs for the electric vehicle infrastructure development. We even have a discretionary grant that concentrates on reduction of truck emissions in the port facilities. So the present administration is very much focused towards some of the goals like reducing or reaching a net zero emissions economy by 2050. Having resiliency plans throughout the nation. At least 50% of the state and the MPO regions should have a resiliency plan by 2026. We are also concentrating on ensuring that the benefits of transportation, clean energy goes to at least 40% of it goes to the disadvantaged communities. And all these goals and targets will only come to fruition if, the research is targeted towards that direction. So thank you again for all the hard work you do and for all your findings that you come up with. And I hope that all of you will have a productive day today. Thank you again.
Back up. We're ahead of schedule. That's a good thing. Our keynote address will be delivered by Jim Timon, Executive Director of the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, affectionately known as AASHTO, a nonprofit, nonpartisan association that supports and represents the interests and missions of state departments of transportation, providing improved quality of life through leadership in transportation. As AASHTO Executive Director, Jim oversees a staff of 130 professionals who support their members in connecting America with the transportation system of today and tomorrow. AASHTO is now in its second century of service to state departments of transportation and their highly skilled employees. Prior to his appointment, Executive Director Timon was AASHTO's Chief Operating Officer and Director of Policy and Management from 2013 to 2018, working closely with the state DOTs in the development of AASHTO's transportation policy positions and overseeing and monitoring of legislative, administrative, and regulatory activities relating to transportation. Mr. Timon previously served as the Staff Director of Highway and Transportation Subcommittee of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. As Staff Director, Jim managed the subcommittee responsible for writing legislation for the Federal Highway Administration, the Federal Transportation Administration, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. It's a lot of administrations. Jim graduated from the University of Delaware with a Bachelor of Arts degree in Economics and Political Science, the Master of Arts degree in Public Policy. He is a native, as I think we already mentioned, of New Jersey. So let's give Executive Director Jim Timon of AASHTO a warm Jersey welcome.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you to Commissioner O'Connor for being here. As the Commissioner mentioned, I am from New Jersey. It's kind of a homecoming of sorts for me. I grew up about a mile down the road, right off of Hughes Drive on Flock Road. My parents still live in the house that I grew up in, and they actually are here in the row back there, yeah. So when I got the invite, I said, how can I not come home and give a speech here a mile from the house that I grew up in a place at a campus that I used to go to summer camp for like soccer and baseball. And literally, I kept telling people at AASHTO in DC, oh, I'm going up there. It's a mile from my house. And I was thinking about it as I was driving up yesterday, and I said, I must be exaggerating. It's got to be a little bit farther than that. But no, I clocked it over here on the way. I mean, it's literally like 1.1 miles from where I grew up. I'm a graduate. You have the standard bio where you talk about where you went to college. But I think more relevant here, and for this audience, went to Steinert High School, about 3 or 4 miles. You got any Steinert grads here? I know we've got a few in the audience there. Yeah, let's give them a round of applause. Absolutely. Absolutely. So again, thank you for having me here. It is a pleasure to be able to speak to you this morning. Full disclosure here, I am not an engineer. I'm not a planner. I come to transportation more from a policy background, from a budget background. So more of a green eye shade, pocket protector type approach. I graduated from Delaware with a public policy background, public policy degree. And really got more into transportation through the budget process. I worked for the White House Budget Office for 3 or 4 years. An opportunity opened up for me to go to Capitol Hill and work for the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. And that's where I really kind of did a deep dive from a transportation standpoint, working on legislative issues, helping to write the federal surface transportation bills that really provide a substantial amount of funding to state departments of transportation for the work that they do. Now, the percentage that each state has of federal dollars versus state and local really varies from state to state. In some states, it's 25 to 30% of what they spend on transportation comes from the federal government. But in a lot of other states, your smaller, or I shouldn't say smaller states, your lower population states but large landmass states, the federal program really represents a significant portion of what gets spent on transportation. And about 11 years ago, I had the opportunity to come to AASHTO to be able to work with state departments of transportation on the legislation that I had worked on in the previous parts of my career. It is a phenomenal organization, AASHTO. Do we have any folks in the audience that have been involved in AASHTO committees or councils or activities in the past? Great. We've got about 10 or so folks in the audience that do that. Really, and I'll get a little bit more into the details on what AASHTO is, but we really try to bring state DOTs together to be able to exchange best practices. One of the common we've been using the last few years, coined really by one of our former presidents and the Secretary of the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development, is we like to do a lot of R&D. So, research folks in this room appreciate R&D, but we call it rip off and duplicate. Because let's be honest, right? I mean, why should we go a great idea that another organization or another state already has. So we try to provide that platform as an organization to bring people together so that if New Jersey is doing something great in one area, Nebraska doesn't have to just go out there and develop it on its own. They can ask New Jersey, well, how did you do this? And then they can replicate it in Nebraska. So hopefully we're able to do that, provide that kind of platform for our state DOTs to be able to exchange best practices and to do some other things. I've got about maybe 25 minutes of prepared remarks, and I'm going to go through some slides, but I'd really like for this to be interactive. So towards the end, I mean, if you guys have questions, I'm happy to answer them. It's a little bit better that way, in my opinion, rather than you just listen to me drone on for, 45 minutes or so. If you've got questions on the things that I'm saying, please feel free to ask them as we get to the end. All right. Okay, so what is AASHTO? So as I think Dave mentioned, we're in our second century here. We were founded in 1914. We are a multimodal organization. We represent every mode of transportation. When we started in 1914, we were the American Association of State Highway Officials because really that's what state agencies were focused on at the time, right? We're focused on roads and highways. But as state DOTs evolved, so did AASHTO as an organization. We added councils and committees that were multimodal that made sure that we were covering transit, rail, water, aviation, and active transportation, something that is really kind of new within the last 10 years or so for us as an organization to make sure that the people that are focusing on cycling and walking within the state DOTs had a place to come together to be able to exchange some of those best practices and the ideas for what's going on. Our board of directors is the 52 state DOTs from across the country. And when I say 52 state DOTs, somebody says, well, Jim, there's your New Jersey public education coming out. There's only 50 states. But we as an organization also consider the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico as state departments of transportation. When you look at the legislation for the federal government when it comes to federal transportation law, they consider DC and Puerto Rico as state DOTs, so we do so as well as an organization, so they also have a seat on our board of directors. Our leadership changes every year. We elect a new president and vice president each year from within our board of directors. We try to rotate those positions regionally. This year, actually, it is somebody from the Northeast. Garrett Eucalito, who's the commissioner of the Connecticut Department of Transportation, is our president. Our treasurer and actually vice president is Russell McMurray from the Georgia DOT. But again, we rotate that around regionally and elect a new slate of officers every year. Our annual meeting is actually next week in Philadelphia, where we'll go through that process and bring in a new set of leaders. We're governed by a strategic plan, and I like to put this up here because I think it's important to show the evolution of the state DOT community and how things have really changed over the years. When I first started to work in this area and with this organization, we were very highway and road focused, and we're also very technical in nature. We do a lot of engineering work, we do a lot of planning work, we work very closely with the research community. And as a result, a lot of our messaging was about, the number of lane miles that are out there, the number of bridges that are out there. And we weren't really connecting, I think, with a broader audience in our messaging and in our objectives. So in this process, when we created our strategic plan in 2020, we wanted to make sure we were focusing on the people that we were serving, our constituents. And as you see in our vision there, we talk about providing quality of life through leadership in transportation. And you see that phrase, quality of life, in a lot of what we do as an organization. Because, look, at the end of the day, we can talk all we want about roughness index and how many bridges are deficient and the work that we're doing on our highways and bridges and our transit systems. But if it's not about how we're impacting people's day-to-day lives, then I think we're missing a great opportunity to be able to better describe what we do as professionals in the transportation community. So again, you'll see that throughout our messaging and the documents that we produce as an organization, trying to make sure that we're connecting with that broader audience, not just engineers and planners and maintenance workers that are really kind of the core group of members that we work with here at AASHTO. Now, we are a trade association. We represent the state departments of transportation in DC. So we do a lot of typical trade association work where we work with Congress to make sure that they're aware of what the priorities are of the state departments of transportation across the country. We also work very closely with Congress to make sure, and the administration to make sure as they're doing regulations and guidance and legislation, that it's done in a way that has that perspective in mind. But more of what we do, what we're, I think, better known for within the engineering and the transportation community is the opportunity to be able to bring people together through about 30 different committees and councils. So if you can think of any job within a state DOT, we have a committee or a council for that. And every state DOT has the opportunity to place people on those committees and councils to be able to bring people together from every state in the country to be able to talk about the important issues in those disciplines. So everything from our Committee on Design, which is responsible for putting together the Green Book. Do we have a lot of engineers here in the audience? Green Book is essentially, the design guidelines for roads and bridges. We put that together at AASHTO, but I don't have a staff of 50 different engineers that work on that. We rely on state DOT volunteers to be able to volunteer their time, to come together, to be able to develop those guidelines, and then we as an organization just pull those recommendations and guidelines together, essentially work to establish them as standards, put them together in a publication, and then disseminate that out into the transportation community. We do that in, again, all different disciplines, whether it's our highway safety manual, the Green Book from a design standpoint. We set standards when it comes to engineering for bridges and tunnels. And more recently, even on the operations side, we produced a transportation operations manual about 1.5 years ago to really reflect the fact that most state DOTs aren't spending the bulk of their time building new infrastructure. They're really focusing on maintaining and operating the existing infrastructure that they have. So we do have a committee that focuses on that, and we produced most recently a transportation operations manual that focuses on that. The other thing that we do that's a little different than most other trade associations is we offer a series of, I think it's like 24 different technical service programs back out to the states. And these are programs where it makes sense for states to pool their resources and for us to collectively develop a program or a product as opposed to each individual state developing it on their own. Now, the largest one that we have and the one that is the biggest part of our budget is our AASHTOware program, which is a suite of software programs that state DOTs utilize to manage projects and to manage budgets for different parts, aspects of the work that they do. What you see here on the screen are just a few of the different committees and technical service programs that are relevant to the issues we're going to talk a little bit about today. We have a committee on environment and sustainability, a committee on transportation system security and resilience. We have a special committee on research and a research advisory committee. Are folks aware and have worked with the National Cooperative Highway Research Program through TRB? So the NCHRP program, the projects that are picked within that program are actually picked through our special committee on research and innovation. State DOTs are the ones that fund the NCHRP program, and as a result, our committee has the jurisdiction of working with the Transportation Research Board and identifying which projects get funded through the NCHRP program. We also, again, within the suite of technical service programs that we offer, we have one on environmental management, one on resilience and sustainability. And then we also operate 2 national centers for excellence. We operate a Center for Excellence in Environment and a Center for Excellence in Operations. And I was just talking to the commissioner earlier this morning. We had an event through our National Center for Excellence in Operations last week up at MetLife Stadium, where we brought folks together from around the country to be able to leverage the experience that New Jersey has had in planning for the World Cup and for other major events. Again, a great opportunity and a great example of how we can bring people together to learn or rip off and duplicate from the experiences that some states have had. And New Jersey has really been preparing for the events that they're going to be having here with the World Cup and bringing other states that not only have World Cup sites for the future World Cup in 2026, but also others that have large events that they're going to be planning for. Salt Lake City just announced for the Winter Olympics coming up in about 10 years. LA in 2 years going to be hosting the Olympics. So bringing those transportation professionals together to be able to talk about how they're going to handle large events like that is something that we try to do as an organization, to provide that platform from state DOTs to be able to really learn from each other. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about climate change, resilience, and sustainability. Look, you don't have to look very far to be reminded of the impacts that we're seeing here from extreme weather and from climate change. Just in the last month, right, we've been faced with 2 serious weather events from Hurricane Milton and Hurricane Helene that have really devastated states in the Southeast and had a severe impact on transportation. So you've got some photos up here on this slide here from the North Carolina Department of Transportation, as well as in Florida here in the middle, and then a map here from Tennessee DOT that shows some of the road closures that were associated with both Hurricane Milton and Hurricane Helene. This is an area where I have found the transportation community is able to respond and responds very quickly, mainly because the staff that we have within the state DOTs and the equipment that we have. It enables state DOTs, I think, to showcase their resilience, their ability to respond, their operational capacities. But as you see most of these shots on the news, you're probably seeing some type of state DOT presence in a lot of the pictures or the videos that you're seeing. 2 hurricanes here that we saw come through last month, I think, are a demonstration of the fact that whether or not you're a climate change denier or somebody that believes in the fact that our climate is changing, we have events that we are dealing with on a regular basis that we need to adapt to and that we need to take into account as we're dealing with our transportation network. So the number of $1 billion disasters continues to increase. If you look at 2023, we've seen just a horrible number here. And this photo here is actually from Lahaina in Maui. But again, this is not unusual anymore. In 2023, we had 28 weather and climate-related disasters that cost at least $1 billion. That makes 2023 the top calendar year for the most billion-dollar disasters in one single year. So this map here shows what locations these billion-dollar disasters occurred. You can see it's pretty much all over the country. There's not a region on this map that is really exempt from having to deal with this crisis. There were almost $100 billion worth of billion-dollar disasters. Now, I know that we've just talked about Helene and Milton and the impact from those 2 hurricanes, but in 2023, the most costly disasters were actually the southern and midwestern drought and heat wave, which cost $14.5 billion, and then a series of southern and eastern severe weather events in March of 2023 that cost about $6 billion. And I know there were some impacts here in New Jersey and eastern Pennsylvania associated with those weather impacts. So between 1980 and 1923, the U.S. sustained a total of 376 weather and climate disasters with the overall damage cost reaching or exceeding $1 billion. The total cost of these events is $2.6 trillion over that time period. So the impact, not only to transportation or to, to what we think of, but just think about that impact to the economy as a whole and what that means to us as a country. A few more slides here to just set the stage, and I won't spend a ton of time on these. This orange line here that goes across the top, again, shows the billion-dollar disasters in that year. And again, you see that there were 28 of them in 2023. But if you look at the other lines here, you see that each year there's more and more of these billion-dollar climate-related disasters. And again, these are CPI adjusted. So this is not something where you're just comparing a 1980 event to a 2023 event. This is also to reflect the fact that there is changes from an inflation standpoint. Again, just another depiction there, but this one shows the total cost as opposed to the number of events. And then again here showing the types of events. Again, you look at 2023, you're up at $600 billion in all types of events here that are shown. The severe storms being the most common type of event, but also tropical cyclones and flooding and winter storms as well, wildfires and droughts. This is a slide that the folks that are on my climate team found interesting. It's from a couple of weeks ago or 3 weeks ago during Hurricane Helene. And it's the website for the National Center for Environmental Information for NOAA. And at the height of Hurricane Helene, essentially, their website went down. And the irony of the fact that the organization that houses all of our environmental data wasn't protected against an environmental crisis like we had in Helene is interesting, right? I mean, they're headquartered in Asheville, obviously, where I would say, probably bore the brunt of Hurricane Helene's impacts. And they're located there because, it was specifically decided that this is an area that should be safe from a lot of those environmental impacts. This is where we should house all of the data associated with this. And sure enough, they were impacted by this. The website was down for several days because of Hurricane Helene. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about the financial impacts that we see. This is a map that shows on the highway side for the Federal Highway Administration's Emergency Relief Program and the financial impacts. And this is, again, just for fiscal year 2024. I actually think this is only the first 6 months of it. And it shows that state DOTs have asked the Federal Highway Administration for over $500 million worth of assistance in emergency relief program dollars. So essentially, if you have a disaster in your state and you need help with debris removal or rebuilding facilities that were impacted by that disaster, there is a program within the Federal Highway Administration where you can apply for federal assistance. It is oversubscribed every year. I believe it gets about $200 million a year from an appropriation standpoint. And you can see just from 6 months in 2024, already over $1 billion or over $500 million has been requested through this program. So, again, the financial impacts, the impacts to our facilities that we're seeing due to climate-related disasters. So what do we do? Look, I look at this from two different perspectives. And the first one is we need to build a more resilient transportation system. And I know that Rutgers and New Jersey DOT have partnered on a lot of work on what can we do to make sure our transportation network is more resilient, that is resilient to the types of disasters that we're seeing in the previous slides. So there's a lot of things that go into that, right? What types of materials are we using? Where are we siting these facilities? How are we building and designing these facilities? This isn't the 1930s or the 40s where we could just kind of lay out a map here and just say, hey, let's go to point A to point B and let's draw a straight line. We've got to take a look at what are the impacts that we're seeing from climate-related events and take that into account as we do our planning, as we do our design, as we select our materials, because that's the world that we live in today. So you're seeing more and more states approach the work that they do within the transportation sector with these factors in mind, because the system that we would build, say, 30, 40, 50 years ago didn't have to be as resilient from an engineering and from a planning or an operations standpoint as it needs to be today. So again, this is a graphic that we like to put up that talks about the planning cycle really needs to consider resilience as part of that. And this is actually something from the Port Authority in New York, New Jersey, where they've identified essentially an iterative approach from a planning cycle standpoint to make sure that you're updating all of the factors that go into the planning process and making sure that it includes the changes that we're seeing within the environment, so that we're not just, again, folding out a map here on a table and figuring out what things look like. We have to be adding in factors that are associated with the changes that we're seeing in our climate. We've talked a little bit earlier about what federal assistance is out there for us to be able to change the way we're doing things. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is the most recent federal piece of legislation that provides funding to state DOTs, to transit agencies, to local communities for transportation. And it's the first major surface transportation bill that has a climate title. And this was very controversial when this was written. Look, I worked on Capitol Hill for 2 of these bills, and they're usually 5 to 6 year bills. When I was up there, there was no chance you would have been able to get a piece of federal transportation legislation passed that had a climate title. But this last bill was absolutely able to include 5 or 6 different programs that are climate specific. One of them here is the PROTECT program. And this is really an opportunity for both from a formula standpoint, and when I say formula, these are formula program dollars that go to the state DOTs every year. They can plan for them, they can program for them. So there is a slug of money that state DOTs get every year that they have to use on projects that are eligible under this program. And the eligibilities are listed here: resilience planning, resilience improvements, community resilient evacuation routes, and at-risk coastal infrastructure. So it's a program that's specifically targeted to and requires states to spend funding on making their infrastructure more resilient to the types of events that we talked about here earlier. Again, this is both a formula program as well as a discretionary program where states and localities can also apply to the US DOT for specific grants in this program. As part of the PROTECT program, there's also the opportunity to develop a resilience improvement plan where state DOTs go out there and put together a plan for how they're going to make their system, their transportation network in their state, more resilient. It's not a requirement, but if a state does put one together, you are eligible for essentially a higher federal match on the programs that you or the projects that you fund through this program. And the second way I think that the transportation community is dealing with the impacts that we're seeing from climate change is finding a way to make our transportation system really and the way that we live our lives more sustainable as a whole. So how can we make our transportation system more sustainable? And this slide here just shows several different aspects of what is going on within this country to try to make transportation more sustainable moving forward and have less of an impact on our nation's climate. One of the things that I talked about earlier, we are a multimodal organization. We have committees and councils for every type of mode And I think that modal shift is something that a lot of state DOTs and local planning and transportation practitioners are looking at. How can we make sure that people have other modal options as opposed to just defaulting to transportation by car? So making sure that there are good public transportation options, making sure that people have the opportunity to walk or to bike wherever they need to go. And also making sure that from a freight standpoint, we're utilizing the different modes of transportation that we have most efficiently. So making sure that we're taking advantage of water transportation to move freight rail transportation, and not just putting everything on a truck and moving it across the country that way. So, we really do need to take an all of the above approach when it comes to our transportation network, because it can't just be highway centric. That absolutely needs to be a part of it, but we also need to be able to lean on all of our other modes of transportation to be able to make sure that we're building a more sustainable transportation network moving forward. This is something that we've been a part of, that the administration has just completed a national national blueprint for transportation decarbonization, making sure that we're working towards decarbonizing our transportation network. And again, that's everything from making sure that we're doing things right from a planning standpoint on the transportation side, making sure that we're leveraging telework and e-commerce, travel demand management, promoting active transportation, and then also looking at ways that we can make the fleet that we have from a vehicle standpoint more fuel efficient and more energy efficient. This program here, again, I think Supta mentioned this. This is the carbon reduction program. It is another program within the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. This, again, provides funding to state DOTs to develop carbon reduction strategies. So again, you've got the resilience side where we're making our transportation network more resilient, and then you've got the carbon reduction side where we're trying to find strategies and projects that will make the transportation network as a whole more sustainable. This is $6.4 billion over 5 years for state DOTs to adopt carbon reduction strategies. And then just a couple of different projects that states are funding here. This is a slide here for the Washington State DOT. They're taking some of their carbon reduction money in order to take some vessels in their ferry fleet and make them either hybrid or electric ferries. And then Minnesota DOT, and utilizing some of their funding in order to really combat stormwater mitigation and making sure from a green transportation standpoint that they're doing everything they can to mitigate the impacts that transportation has on our environment. The other program that I didn't have in the slides here that I did want to mention is the NEVI program, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. Another, I would say, hallmark piece of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And it's put state DOTs in a little bit of a weird spot in that it asks state DOTs to go out there and work with local communities and with the private sector in building out an electric vehicle charging network. And, it's absolutely the right thing to do as we try to transition our fleet, because range anxiety for EV owners is a real thing. But this isn't an area of business that state DOTs have been in the past, right? When you think about how you fuel your vehicle, right, you pull up to a gas station and, and again, in New Jersey, you guys don't get out to pump your own gas, I know. What a shocker that was for me, right? When I left New Jersey and I'm sitting there, in Delaware at the gas station, and I'm like, why isn't anybody filling up my gas? But, if you've got an electric vehicle, you've got to think about things a little differently. You've got to plan things. I am a new EV owner, and I came up in my EV last night, and I'm like, all right, what am I going to do when I get up here? Because I got to drive back this afternoon. So, I've got to make sure I found a charger to be able to charge so that I can make it back to able to build out this infrastructure network. But in the long run, we really want the private sector to see the opportunity here in the similar way that they see it with service stations and gas stations, right? They should see the opportunity to come in and provide that infrastructure. But this program is, I think, really that first step in making sure that we can provide EV owners with a little bit of comfort when it comes to range anxiety. So that's another aspect of IIJA that I think helps us build a more sustainable transportation network. All right, now, before I end here, I did want to play a quick video on that I think sums up not only what we're facing from a climate standpoint, but also I think highlights the work that state DOTs do in this area and how state DOTs can really come together to help each other. It's a video that was put together by the Tennessee Department of Transportation. It was played as part of the Tennessee-Florida football game in Knoxville a few weeks ago. And I'll play it here in just a...
On September 27th, Hurricane Helene tore through the heart of our region, leaving devastation in its wake.
It's hard to think what happened.
From the mountains of Tennessee to the hills of North Carolina, entire communities have been left in ruin. Families displaced, homes destroyed, and lives shattered. But in the darkest of times, the volunteer spirit shines the brightest. In the wake of this tragedy, over 700 TDOT and FDOT volunteers have come together, working tirelessly day and night to help recover what's been lost, clearing roads, restoring power, and bringing much-needed hope to communities left reeling from the storm. Because when we stand together, we are stronger, more united, more resilient, and more determined than ever. Whether in Tennessee orange or Florida blue, we're united by something much greater, the human spirit. From the heart of Knoxville to the far reaches of the Appalachian Mountains, we are all volunteers, and we are prepared to return the favor whenever we are called upon. Together, we will rebuild, and together, we are mountain strong.
So, I think that demonstrates a lot of things that we talked about here this morning, right? It shows the impact that we're all dealing with from a climate standpoint, but it also shows how state DOTs come together to be able to help each other. We always try to facilitate those conversations. Butch Ely, who is the commissioner of the Tennessee DOT, one of Fran's colleagues on our board, sent me this and called me on the Sunday after the Tennessee Florida football game, and Tennessee won, so he was in a little bit of a better mood. But he said, I'd love to be able to use this in other venues because it shows how FDOT, Florida DOT, who was really prepared to take the brunt from Helene when it was originally forecast, Tennessee said, hey, we know you're going to get hit hard. We're going to send folks down to you. Well, as fate would have it, they didn't see as much impacts in Florida as Tennessee did. So Florida just turned around and said, okay, well, we're going to send staff up to help you. And then essentially a week later, Milton comes down and really does significant damage in Florida. And then Tennessee said, okay, we're going to send a bunch of crews down to help you. So it shows, again, the impacts that we're dealing with from a climate change standpoint, but also how we can work together to help mitigate some of those impacts and recover. So thank you again for having me here. I'm happy to take some questions if we have a few minutes. So let me know.
Mackenzie has
Any questions?
up there.
Thank you, Jim. So for most of your presentation, you talked about natural disasters. And in the last few weeks and months, it has really devastated a lot of, the states. So as a department, as a body, what are we doing? I know you talked about we doing things to kind of sustain what is going on, but are there preventive measures? Like, I always talk about Florida as a place where I might not want to live because each year these recurring natural disasters happen. Are there ways we are trying to conscientize people to get away closer, like get off a certain amount from close to being to the waters? Are there preventive ways that we can bring up that people will understand that because of these, we are trying to prevent these things? Because natural disasters are things we don't have control over. So what are some of the preventive measures? I know when these happen, there will always be ways to kind of mitigate them, but prevention, I feel, is better. So what are some of the preventive measures DOTs around the whole country are doing to, mitigate these problems? Thank you.
Well, thanks. I think that's a great question. I do think that, the resilient efforts, the efforts in the resilience area are one ways that we can try to prevent or at least mitigate the impacts. But if you're talking about how can we prevent people from being in harm's way, I think that's a really difficult question because I think that involves land use decisions and making judgments and decisions on where people are living now or where people want to live and trying to persuade them not to go there. You're seeing that a little bit on the private sector side with insurance, right? I mean, the insurance industry is responding to the increases in costs that you're seeing for these disasters. In Florida, it is very difficult to get homeowners insurance in a lot of these low-lying areas. As a result, the state is really struggling for what's the path forward there. The same thing in parts of the West from a California standpoint and Colorado and places that are more susceptible now to wildfires than they were in the past. So a little bit of the market economy working there where the insurance industry is saying, look, if you choose to live here, I don't know if I will insure that house or insure that property. But I think on the governmental side, I think it's hard for states or localities to just go in there and say, hey, Long Beach Island is a low-lying barrier island. Nobody should live there. I'm not saying that. As somebody that, vacationed there as a kid, I would never say that. But, I mean, the reality is if we continue to see the impacts that we're seeing today from climate change and sea level rise, you have some serious questions that'll need to be answered in the future for a lot of those low-lying areas across the country. There are some states that have looked at really impacted communities that continue to get flooded or impacted and have said to residents, look, we're going to buy you out. We're going to move you to a different place. So there's a community in Louisiana, I can't remember the name of it, but they've essentially said, we're going to move this entire town, this entire community out of this area because of the way that Louisiana's geography is changing. And that's an example there. But those decisions are really hard from a public official standpoint. Dave or Jessica, I'll let you guys tell me if I'm... Yeah, all right. I bet you will, yeah. It's the New Jersey way, isn't it?
Thank you. My name is Greg Waltman, Rutgers University. I'm really curious. So New Jersey is really kind of a target for flooding. We have a lot of different flooding issues, coastal flooding, and also stormwater runoff flooding. So I know that on one of your slides you had a couple different co-benefits or like mitigation, but what do you think, I just kind of want to follow up with like preventative. What do you think we could do to make our transportation and built environment infrastructure less susceptible to flash flooding and coastal flooding?
Yeah, so again, I think on the coastal side, that's a tough question, just because of the nature of where infrastructure facilities are located. Again, to use an example here, I'll use an example in Delaware. They have a community where even on a sunny day, if it's high tide and full moon, that the only road into and out of that community floods. So they've had to go in and take a look at that facility and say, you know, what can we do here in order to make sure that the residents have access to their homes? And honestly, the first analysis that they did was it makes more sense financially for us to buy them out and move them, because for us to essentially elevate that roadway, build a bridge, a causeway, it would cost significantly more. They instead came up with a different approach where they're using more innovative materials in the roadway that they have elevated slightly so that it drains better and that it is available to the residents in most situations with the exception of extreme events. So it's an innovative way for them to approach some of the coastal flooding issues that they have there. I would say when it comes to flash flood and stormwater runoff, just really continuing to look at the best practices that are being developed across the country when it comes to more permeable surfaces, to be able to make sure that that water is absorbed into these facilities as opposed to just automatically running off. And then making sure that even from a maintenance standpoint, right, when it comes to making sure that our culverts and our storm drains are clear so that we can be able to absorb the amount of water that is associated with some of these even common events, not even extreme ones, just common events. That's another aspect that we can hopefully improve upon to be able to mitigate some of the impacts that we're seeing.
Hello, my name is Robert. I'm with the NJDOT. Thank you for the presentation, Jim. After hearing a little bit about your background in public policy, I wanted to ask you this. The last few years have been wildly successful for getting infrastructure legislation passed, but by its very nature, it might not be something that's very flashy or that the public talks about enough, I feel like. What are some of the challenges in convincing people to continue to invest in infrastructure and see the importance of what the transportation professionals do as a whole?
So for a record, we don't know each other. This isn't a planted question, but this is like right in my wheelhouse, so thank you. And actually, it's a focus that we have as an organization. Look, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act was the largest infrastructure bill that the federal government has ever done, and it is provided an opportunity for us to really make some progress on maintaining and bringing our infrastructure up to the level that it needs to be. It is probably the single most important legislative accomplishment for this administration and for the Congress in the last few years that's not related to COVID. And it was bipartisan in nature, the way it was done. It's one of the few pieces of bipartisan legislation that Congress and the White House were able to agree on and get done. I still believe that transportation is one of the last bipartisan areas of agreement within the Washington, D.C. Beltway. And I'm hopeful that as this legislation expires and we prepare for the next one, we'll be able to generate that bipartisan support to get the next bill done on time with bipartisan support. But we want it at the levels that we saw in this bill. And there's a real danger in that not happening, because we have to better tell the story of what we've used these dollars for. How have we been good stewards of the taxpayer dollars and invested this record amount of federal infrastructure funding in projects that are going to improve the quality of life for people in this country? So we're embarking on an effort over the next year at AASHTO to identify stories, how we can better tell the story of how the IIJA has produced projects and programs that have really impacted people's quality of life, so that we can go to Congress and the White House, whoever's in the White House in the next 2 years, and say, look, this shouldn't have been just a blip on the radar. you need to spend this much money every year, not just because it was a one-time deal. We want this to be the new baseline moving forward, and it's going to be a priority for us to try to make that case. So again, thank you all for having me here. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Dave.
I don't know about you, but I could listen to Jim all day long, to be honest with you. Let's give him another round of applause. He was really good. Mr. and Mrs. Timon, you must be very proud of this man. He is outstanding, and we really appreciate him coming as our keynote. Like I said, we didn't want to do one last question, but he's a great presenter and a wealth of knowledge, and I thank you for that. All right.